What's up folks, Nate here at Two Wheel Dyno Works. Today I'm on our dyno with our 2025 Tenere 700, which I've got rather torn apart behind me, because we're finally testing the GYTR airbox from Yamaha to see just how much more power it uncorks on these new bikes. Now I ordered this thing quite a few months ago, and it still hasn't shown up, because there's like really only one GYTR dealer that speaks English that you can actually order these things from. I believe they're called Off the Road or something like that, out of Germany. So mine's still not here, but luckily one of our customers went ahead and ordered one and was nice enough to send it over to us so we can go ahead and build mapping for it for the various exhaust combinations. And as always, I've gone back to my personal favorite Acura, but I've also now done it for the high mounts and for the Yosh as well. So let's take a look here real quick before we dive into the performance that this thing provides at where this bike started stock, and then with a full exhaust and with a snorkel delete, and then we can have a good place to compare the performance of this thing, because it's definitely flown quite a bit better than the stock airbox ever could, even with the snorkel out of the equation. So this is what that looks like. The red line there is this bike in bone stock form right after we were done breaking it in on pump gas. 63.5 horsepower, 44 and about a third pound-feet of torque. The blue line is with a slip-on installed and the snorkel yanked out of the airbox. I'm not going to cover the snorkel delete in this video because we've already covered that to death over the years, and we've got a whole video specifically on that for this bike. You can find that on our YouTube channel if you search back a ways, or on our Facebook page. With the slip-on and the snorkel delete, power comes up to about 64.5, and torque comes out to about 46.5. You can see there's a pretty significant gain right here about 5,500, and then those gains kind of carry the whole way up to the rev limiter. But then the green line is where things start to get interesting. That is with a full exhaust, specifically the full Acura that I've got on the bike right now, and you're making almost 69 horsepower and about 48.5 pound-feet of torque, which, again, there's even bigger torque improvements there, about 5,500, and then a big jump in power way out there near the limiter at about 9,500. And obviously all of those gains for both the slip-on and the snorkel delete and the full exhaust and the snorkel delete are with our custom ECU mapping in place. Again, not going to cover all that a lot today because we've covered that in previous videos. If you want to see what those gains look like and what we've got to do to accomplish that, or the benefits of our custom ECU mapping, which are enormous on this bike, go check that out in those videos. Now, we also went ahead and covered one other intake that's worth mentioning before we talk about this one, and that is that nice CNC airbox that we went ahead and showed you in the last video on our Tenere 700 that did provide some significant top-end improvements and change the shape of the power curve quite a bit. And here's what that looks like. It did cost you just a hair here through the mid-range, but it carried the power much better from about 7,500 RPM all the way to the limiter, where you're gaining 3.5, almost 4 horsepower up there at the upper portion of the rev range, and you're only costing yourself like 1 pound-foot of torque and 1 horsepower there in the middle. That's how I've been primarily riding this bike around personally, because I like that much more linear power curve. I like that extra power up there, and I do actually use that portion of the rev range from time to time, because I kind of ride our bike honestly like a jackass. But the GYTR airbox is actually kind of now the best of both worlds. Because not only do we have nearly the same peak power now with this GYTR airbox installed, we have more torque than ever throughout the rest of the rev range. The red line there is the exact same setup with the full Acura and our custom ECU mapping to match the new airflow characteristics of the GYTR airbox. And I'm not going to lie, I'm actually surprised it works this well. There is only one spot in the rev range, right there around 8,500 RPM or so, where this thing makes anywhere less than 1 horsepower different from the nice CNC airbox, but you make massively more power and torque literally everywhere throughout the entirety of the rev range on the way to that peak power figure. You're actually gaining 3 to 4 pound-feet of torque more than the stock box or the nice CNC box, depending upon where you look here, right in the meat of the rev range between about 5,000 and 7,000 RPM, and you're picking up almost the same amount of power throughout the entirety of the rev range as well, until you get out to about that 8,500 RPM point. So it really is the best of both worlds here, folks. The GYTR airbox provides the same peak power, within half a horsepower anyway, of the nice CNC box, but way more torque and power everywhere else throughout the rev range where you're primarily riding these bikes. Now, it's worth mentioning that you just cannot drop this airbox on the bike and expect to see those gains. Again, I'm not going to dive too much into the throttle-by-wire mapping restrictions and lean fueling and all that stuff that we cover in our previous videos about the benefits and importance of tuning on these bikes, but I will say this. The fuel mapping necessary to accommodate those big horsepower and torque improvements through most of the rev range is quite a bit more than the stock fuel mapping can handle. There's a lot of places now where I'm like plus 15% more fuel than stock with this exact setup on the bike to get the AFRs down to where they need to be to produce power safely. And you just cannot expect these results, nor safely do this without custom ECU mapping from someone like us here at Tool Dynaworks. So if you're going to get one of those GYTR airboxes and slap it onto something like the full Acra, the full Yosh, or one of the full high mount systems, yeah, we've got mapping now built for all that, but it's really not optional, folks. The bike will run way too lean and just start lean misfiring if you try to install one of these without proper tuning. And what's really important to look at here is how the bike performs now with these components installed versus how you get it when it's brand new off the showroom floor. Because that's the difference everyone wants to see. How is it going to perform once I do these modifications, get the bike tuned, versus how I bought it? And it's an absolutely night and day difference. The blue line there on the screen is the bike in bone stock trim, and the red line is how it sits right now. The full Acra, the GYTR airbox, and our custom tuning. Right there around 5,000 to 5,500 RPM, that is a 23% improvement to torque, and about a 21% improvement to horsepower. That's almost a quarter more horsepower and torque through the portion of the rev range that you're using the majority of the time. It is massively transformative to how the bike feels when you're riding down the road and how much more throttle response the thing has when it's simply making that much more torque and power. And again, I can't stress this enough. I'm honestly impressed it works this well. I did not expect these gains whatsoever when I was just looking at the box externally and the filter design, but it works fantastically well. So much to the point that I was honestly hoping I was just going to cancel our own order for our GYTR box after this gentleman went ahead and sent it to us so we can build the mapping for it for all of you guys out there, our customers. But now seeing how it performs and the fact that I ride this bike quite a bit myself, I'm going to keep it on order because I want one. So if you're looking to get your new 25 T7 properly tuned and dialed in for one of these badass GYTR airboxes, look no further than tooldynaworks.com. Our mail and ECU flashing service for these bikes is available on our site for $349.99, and I can guarantee that you're just not going to find higher quality intake and exhaust specific tuning for these bikes anywhere else on the planet than right here at Tool Dynaworks, because nobody else goes through anywhere near the level of the intake and exhaust specific tuning R&D that we do right here at the shop on this platform. And as always, if you have any questions whatsoever about intake mods, exhaust mods, tuning, whatever it is on these bikes, please do not hesitate to email us at support@tooldynaworks.com. I personally answer any all tech support questions we get here at the shop every single day that we're open, and we are truly always happy to help.